Hi, everybody. Today we're doing Holy Week devotions and starting out with the actions that Jesus did on Monday of Holy Week. And every day we'll go through and see what Jesus was up to every day of the week and how that translates into what happens at the end of the week and leads up to Easter and the questions of why did they kill Jesus, what was at stake, and what made people so mad about what he was doing that they would do that. So these are our devotions that really give you a little context about what you read and encourage you to do the reading on your own and to read the passages devotionally and thinking about how it might apply to your life and what you might be able to hear out of each passage for application to you, especially during this week, this dangerous week that we enter with COVID-19. So just gonna look at the passages we're going through. Mark's Gospel. Our confirmation kids are learning Mark and reading it, and so learning about the last week of Jesus' life from Mark's Gospel is a way to show some solidarity with them. Hey, confirmation kids. So, Jesus rides into town on Palm Sunday into Jerusalem. And there's the big hoopla, the big parade, the hosannas, all of that. And on Sunday, when he comes into town, it's like, well, that's a big grand entrance. Then what happens? And it's one of the most anticlimactic scenes in the Bible. Mark says he went in, he looked around, and as it was already getting late, they went home, out of town to Bethany to rest for the night. So this whole big drama of the parade, he's coming into town, what's going to happen, all the anticipation, and he looks around and leaves. So the next day, Monday, and you find this in Mark chapter 11, verses 12 through 19. And so the next thing that we see is he goes back to Jerusalem, goes back to the temple, and it seems like he's a little grumpy because he comes across this fig tree and he can't figure, and he's asking about, this fig tree, and it's not the season for it to grow figs, and there are no figs on it. And so then he says, may no one ever eat figs from you again. And it's like, what? You just cursed the fig tree for no reason because it wasn't the season for figs and it didn't have figs? What is this? Is he just grumpy or insane, or what's going on? Well, later, the next day, on Tuesday, the disciples ask him about it, and he gives his explanation. And it all has to do with being a symbolic action that related to the temple, which was no longer producing in the way that it should, and people weren't being fed as they should have been from what was supposed to be happening at the temple. And we know that when he gets to the temple, he causes a ruckus. He overturns the tables of the money changers. He drives the vendors out. And again, is he grumpy or what? And here again, it's a symbolic action, and he's angry. And it does well for us to pay attention to what makes him so angry. So we have the money changers. Jed Myers, in his book Binding the Strong Man, argues very strongly that one of the things that was going on was these money changers were exchanging the money, the common currency, the Roman coinage of the day, for special temple currency, and there was an exchange rate. Like any place where you go and you exchange currencies, there's an exchange rate. And so Ched Myers says what was going on was there was a lot of exploitation there, and you had to get this temple money to buy sacrifices to be made on your behalf so your sins could be forgiven. But when you went to the temple, the exchange rate was so high that it priced a lot of ordinary people out of the market. They just couldn't afford it. Kind of like, when you go to the airport, they've got you, so you have to pay a lot more than you would anywhere else for that bottle of water or that bag of chips. Well, kind of this price gouging thing was happening, and so common, ordinary people weren't able to afford the rituals that they needed. And so Jesus kind of said, we're done with these rituals. No more sacrifice needed and sacrificing all these doves and everything to get your sins forgiven. I'll be the sacrifice. This is over. This is nuts. This should be open to everyone. In fact, Jesus then says, is not this to be a house of prayer for all nations? I love that all nations part of it. When he starts talking that language, it's, for all the people. And, that's what religious institutions, Christians should be about, is welcoming all people. And yet, history is just so evident in so many churches today that find ways of excluding people rather than including them. It's like, no, it should be for all the people. And he says, yet you have made it a den of thieves. And this is language, go back to Jeremiah chapter 7 and read that, where he's quoting directly from Jeremiah chapter 7. And the issue there was the people of God weren't obeying the commandments. They weren't treating their neighbors well. They were exploiting the poor and the vulnerable, and then coming to the temple and thinking, everything was fine as long as they, worshiped God. Then God had their back, and everything was copacetic. But the prophets kept saying, no, we abhor that kind of thing. What you believe should make a difference in how you treat others, and especially those who are the most vulnerable in society. So the prophets were angered by this, and Jesus is angered by what he sees going on in his own time. The institutions that were supposed to care for the poor, this institution of the temple, supposed to care for the marginalized, failed. That's what gets Jesus angry. It was set up for them to respond, to take care of the widows and the orphans, but they failed to do so, and instead congratulated themselves on how holy they were and how good they were doing. It's hard not to think about that in our present context. We have to find ways of being institutions that care, that respond to human need. It's not just about our holiness, our ability to follow some of the commandments. We're supposed to reach out to the most vulnerable, the least, and the lost. And that's what our worship should be, is something that carries out into how we treat other people. And so I think that's what Jesus is getting at there. And no room for bragging, no room for self-assurance. It's about, we're gifted and we're blessed to be able to help others along their way. Well, all of this comes at such a challenge to the status quo that Jesus shut down the temple for a day, it says, and by the end of the day, the authorities are looking for a way to kill him. Not just say we disagree with your protest and your approach, but they're looking for a way to kill him. That he's representing a challenge to all of the way that things were in that day, and looking for a time when faith and religion could be practiced as healing for all people and looking out for everybody. So as you go out this week, a few things to kind of think about. You know, this is the season in your life to bear some fruit like that. Unlike the fig tree, what fruit can you bear in terms of your kindness, your goodness, your example, your integrity? So what fruit are you called to bear this week? Who can you help out? And then to look at that about who you're helping and assisting. One of the things in the passage is that whole language about den of thieves. A den of thieves is not where the thieves are going and robbing. The den is where they go to afterward, the safe place to divvy up the loot amongst themselves. And so some people were benefiting very well from the system that was, and dividing up the money amongst themselves, instead of sharing it and distributing it where it was needing to go. So that's the kind of idea of all of this, and look at that, and look at how you look at your money as a resource to be able to share and to help people. How you encounter others and give thanks for your daily bread. So these are just some thoughts to think about as you go through the passage yourself. Pick out some words. First read it through slowly, and then read it through a second time and see what kind of things really pop out to you, and then ask God in your prayers, what should I do with this today? So happy reading, and we'll see you next time.